Dude, yesterday when you were talking, I was like, I was like, somebody got good free work.
The impact.
Living in a memory.
Hey guys, thank you for coming back to Impact Podcast. And of course, you know, we are always looking for people that impact their world. And today, again, we have Pete Garcia. And I'm really glad we have my business partner and my friend in Kevin Broderick. And so he's going to be participating in this melee that is Pete Garcia and talking about paganism. This is going to be interesting because it may not go exactly where you think it's going to go. And that's what I love about Pete. The moment you see a title, don't just judge the book by its cover. You better read some, because normally it's things you never thought about. and you will be surprised, maybe make you mad, some of you. As a matter of fact, I can just about guarantee it's going to make some of you Christians mad. But guess what? You'll get over it. And we'll all kumbaya together, and we'll all thank God one day while we're in eternity that we didn't fight over some things that were quite honestly stupid. So, you know, let's get it that way. Hey, Pete, let me tell you, and I'm going to start it off this way with just a quick story, and I won't be real long. A lot of people don't know, but I was actually a student pastor for 15 years. I think Kevin knows. And when I started in the ministry, I started like a lot of guys did, and I started as a student pastor. And of course, in student ministry, you're always trying to come up with creative alternatives to what the world is doing, you know. And a lot of the kids used to love to go to those really, really nasty, demonic, what I would term demonic, haunted houses, you know, fright nights and things like that, you know, and things that I was like, man, you know, we got to be able to come up with some sort of alternative for it. You know, because we're at this point, we're not talking about your 5-year-old going on trick or treat. We're talking about going to a place that is geared towards, you know, killing, stealing, destroying type of thing, right? Yeah. And so, Pete, I told this group, and it was my very first youth pastorate. Okay, which means you are going to make a lot of dumb decisions typically when you're in your first youth pastorate. And this was no exception, and may have been in the Hall of Fame in dumb decisions. So let me just tell you what we did real quickly. I started advertising a Halloween alternative to all of our youth group, which at the time was running about 300 kids. We started out with about 8. It built up, you know, and God was just blessing. We had kids getting saved and everything. But a lot of the kids, there was a big haunted house that was that, you know, they travel around and they open these places up, and it had it back then. It was like a Friday the 13th type of thing. I was like, guys, you don't need to do that, right? And so I told them, I said, tell you what, here's what I'm going to do. I will scare you worse than that haunted house, and it will not be in any way demonic. And they were like, no way. I said, you give me one shot, just one shot, and I'll do it, right? So I planned this big night, and I had buses loaded with kids. And I'm talking about kids that I had never even seen before because everybody got all jacked up. Well, I advertised this thing all the way up until about 2 weeks out from Halloween. I quit on purpose advertising it, and people were just signing up because of the hype that kind of got built. I had all these buses. Now, all we did was we went to some people's house that lived on some property way out in the middle of the woods. That was it. And I told 2 of my girls, I said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to set this up to where the buses are going to break down on this back road where there are no lights. There's no lights there. They're going to fake breakdown. And we're going to bring in a group of thugs coming the opposite direction and they're going to be gang members, and they're going to come in. And while we're out there, and the only thing that are going to be on are the headlights from these buses and the cars. And these kids on the cars are in the buses are going to be in there. So when my guy pulled the choke and stalled the bus out, all the buses came to a stop, and I told all the kids. Now, all the kids had thought that the scary thing was coming sometimes later, right? At this big party thing we're throwing. And so the buses stopped, and I told them, I was like, hey guys, stay on the bus real quick. I'm sorry about this. We'll check it out. So we opened up the hood and everything. So it kind of made it hard for the kids to see what was going on. And my guys come pulling up right on cue. And my one guy that was in our youth group, he's dressed up and nobody could really tell who he was. And the other guys that all piled out of this car, I didn't know who they were. And I'm like, I don't know who these other kids are. And they're big kids, right? And I'm like, who are the other kids, right? And they're all dressed like gang members. And the idea is we were all going to fake fight out in front of the lights in the dark.
This is getting elaborate.
All you would see is us passing through, right? They grabbed me. The idea was they grabbed me. They pulled me up on the bus with a fake gun to my head. All right, come on, everybody, get your money out, and they got a gun to my head. I'm like, guys, just do what they say. I got kids screaming under the seats, kids screaming, crying, traumatized. I had these 4 girls that were 300 pounds apiece. They were sitting in the back seats, and they always sat in the back seats on the bus. And we had it planned to where one of our girls was going to stand up and say, you leave them alone. And she did. She stood up and said, you leave them alone. And nobody heard it. And the guys didn't hear it. And I'm like, uh-oh, we got a problem. And she goes, you leave them alone again. And they go out. The one guy with a gun, another guy goes down there, grabs her, yanks her out and says, let's take the girl. And they her name was Audrey. They ripped her off the bus and they threw her in the car and they took off. Kids are under the seat. I got kids screaming, and I'm talking about sobbing so loud. It was horrible. So I'm like, okay, listen, we're going to go. We're just down the road. We're going to go. We got to call the police, blah, 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 blah. Well, they just turned around and sped off that way and just went to the house. And they were all out there at the campfire where we had this huge campfire. And so we get to the place. Kids are screaming. I mean, I got kids just kids that are not. I got kids that are traumatized. We get to the thing, and all the buses park. Now none of the kids realize. Wait, all the buses just started easily. They're that traumatized. And we get there, and Audrey is standing out there at the fire. The guys are standing out there at the fire. They're all standing there. These kids, none of the kids in any of the buses see it. I mean, I got busloads of kids that are screaming and crying. So I turned around. They opened the door. I turned around. My bus driver opens the door, and I said, guys, do you remember when I told you I was going to scare you and not even be demonic? And you heard kids going, huh? What? And kids started screaming, and I had a busload of kids go rushing at me. I have to take off running because I got kids that are so mad chasing me around this bonfire. And here's the thing. It didn't turn out well. We lost kids out of the youth group from it. I had mom and dads calling the pastor trying to get me fired.
Think what that conversation is like when they go home and tell their parents.
Oh, yeah. I had a father call me at 3:00 in the morning. My daughter will not go to sleep. We are leaving the church. I will make sure you're fired. It was that bad,
oh, man.
Right? I said all that to say, by the way, I didn't get fired for it, but I did get a very, very stern talking to. So I said all that to say this. You never know what you're in for. And when it comes
Yeah.
to Christians, man, some Christians just are they overreact to everything, right?
Mhm.
And that day I was trying to offer an alternative for Halloween, things like that. And I still say it was a good thing. And I like churches that offer an alternative where the kids can still go and they can still dress up, and go and get candy and stuff like that. But let's be honest, it is a pagan holiday. But then
Mhm.
again, Pete, aren't pretty much all of them pagan holidays in their roots and stuff like that? I know you wrote this great article, and I really want you to talk about what you wrote, and let's go from there. And hopefully, the Christians won't lynch you like they were ready to lynch me on that bus.
Well, yeah, they already are, or they already are.
Yeah.
But I guess the two big takeaways from my article, if you were to summarize it into two sentences, is that on one hand, for most of human history, paganism has been the norm. It's been the
Yeah.
standard cultural worldview going back to the antediluvian pre-flood days. And then the other hand, you have, as of the last 2,000 years, you've had the rise of Christianity and then the reaction to um, paganism and to the paganizing of various cultures. And there's a tendency for us to overreact in a couple of different ways. One, we rush into legalism. We rush into this mindset that if it has anything to do with anything pagan, mind you, most of human history has been pagan, so
Yeah.
that pretty much touches almost everything. Then you can't have anything to do with it. And then the other reaction is to embrace like Judaism and trying to put the Mosaic laws, all 613, back on top of the church. And you've seen this with the rise of various cults. You've seen this with, as of the last 30, 40 years, Hebrew roots movement, blending the law back into Christianity in a very slick way. And it's very decentralized, much like the emergent church movement, which blends Eastern mysticism back into the church and
Yeah.
mysticism in general. So that was kind of my two big takeaways, and then kind of my conclusion to that was, how does the Christian live? We obviously we know that we live in this world, but we're not to be in love with this world. Paul gives us tells us in Colossians 2 that don't let anybody judge you in your festivals and feast and all that. And he doesn't put any kind of qualifiers on it. He doesn't say the feast of the Lord. He doesn't say Jewish feast. Really, it just says feast, festivals, new moons, etc. So, and he very easily could have, but he doesn't. And then on the flip side of that is, he gives caution in I think 2 Corinthians 8, where he says, even if you have liberty, I guess, to say that to eat meat, even sacrificed idol, because what is an idol? An idol is just a piece of wood. It's a piece of stone. It's nothing.
Right.
There's only one God. However, if by doing so you're eating this meat in front of a weaker brother and causes them to stumble and sin, then you should not do it. And he goes, I would avoid eating meat altogether for the rest of my life if that were possible. So I think it's us Christians being able to use discernment, recognizing the culture that we're living in. Sorry, and being good stewards with the gifts God's given us, the discernment He's given us, the biblical worldview He's given us, the Holy Spirit's guiding in these things, and then the mandates for us to be good parents and to be good brothers and sisters in Christ, and not use this time as a time to like form a circular firing squad and shoot each other, like we are so prone to do every holiday season, and just bash each other because somebody put up a Christmas tree in their house, and that's pagan. Even the
Yeah.
days of the week are pagan. I mean, they're either
Yeah.
named after Norse gods or Roman gods,
Yeah.
and there's no escaping. It's like today trying to say you're going to boycott woke companies. Well, good luck. I mean, you're pretty much going to have to make all your own clothes, buy all your own food, make your own energy, fuel, etc. I mean, you can't. It's everything has been tainted and corrupted these days. And here's something that I didn't mention yesterday, and I wanted to touch on it today because it's something that kind of I thought about this morning. But as I said at the beginning, paganism has been the norm. when the Jews, well, let me say the Hebrews, when Abraham was called out of the land of the Chaldees and came over with his entourage, and he's, through his progeny, Isaac and Jacob, and then the 12 tribes, and then the whole lineage of the Jewish people comes forth. When God gives the law to Moses, he establishes what, 7 main feasts of the Lord. You have 4 in the spring and you have 3 in the fall. And then the Jews have created more feasts because of things that have happened throughout their history, like Tish B'Av is like a day of mourning and fasting.
Right.
Hanukkah, the dedication of lights is because of the Maccabean revolt and the miracle that took place there. So they have probably in the neighborhood of 10 or more feasts. But what does the church have? The Christian church? We don't have anything. We have
Yeah,
communion.
yeah, we don't have any.
We have baptism. Baptism and communion are the 2 ordinances we're left with, but we're not left with anything.
Yeah.
So, I was just thinking about that this morning. I was like, man, it seems odd because if we try to, there's a tendency for us to want to go back and embrace our Jewish roots of our faith, but that is such a slippery slope that takes people into legalism. It's such a dangerous precedence, and that's why Paul writes so much against it. And obviously, the Judaizers were his big challengers of that day. And so, what do we have left? We have whatever culture we're in. We try and make the best of a bad situation. So, can you not celebrate, but can you participate in Halloween and yet not embrace all the evil, wicked stuff? And I was trying to bring out the innocence of the way it used to be, from the 40s, 50s, 60s, and even the mid 70s. It just seemed like it was a more innocent time, and it wasn't as dark and demonic as it's become. And that change has happened really quickly in just the last few decades.
Desensitization of the nation.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've really, one thing too that you were talking about, Pete, that I thought was really good, and you'll like this, is you were talking about how the time that the United States has really been, from its formation until just recently, in the last 20 years, 50 years, it's an anomaly. It really has been an anomaly because what you were talking about and what he was talking about is and alluded to it earlier. Paganism has been the norm really since since after the fall. I mean, once all of that happened, I mean, you get to really Genesis, chapter 3, paganism is already here. I mean, with the Nephilim and all of that stuff, and it doesn't stop after the flood. Then you've got everything going on. Sin, when it entered the world, man, you talking about the destruction was just complete. And now the United States, when the church comes along, the mystery of the church comes along, and now you've got time later that God allows the United States to be formed, and it seems like there's this respite in history that allows the church to flourish. In the United States, we see more people reached through the United States and missionaries and all of that stuff. But that window is closed, I believe, and is if it's not completely closed, it's rapidly closing. I mean, would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, it is, and it's that's also coincides with what Scripture tells us about the last days, and that perilous times would come, that scoffers would come in the end, that there would be great deception, and there would be times of violence and wickedness, like the days of Lot, the days of Noah. Jesus even likened the church. I look at the 7 letters to the 7 churches as kind of a review of the 2,000 years. Now, Jesus is doing this in 95 AD, but he's looking forward in time and saying this is how the church age is going to be. Well, the last church age that you have is Laodicea, which is this lukewarm, church. And really, the last 3 churches are kind of all overlapping each other. You've got the church at Sardis, the dead church. You have the faithful church of Philadelphia, and then you have Laodicea, which those churches are all kind of coexisting at the same time. Well, as I mentioned, what I said earlier about the church, we don't have any festivals or feasts or anything that we can really call our own,
Yeah.
unless you count like Reformation Day or some Protestant or maybe Catholic things, but
Right.
which Halloween is stems from, right? All Saints
Yeah.
Day. And you have this deadening effect, I think, because of that. And I lay a lot of blame at the feet of the Protestant Reformation. You've heard of the I think it's an acronym, WASP, White Anglo-Saxon Protestant.
Yeah.
It's just kind of this
Hmm.
Puritan based morality, piety kind of thing, that we were not to dance or drink or chew or go with girls
Right.
who do, and that kind of the Baptist kind of motto.
I was going to say,
um
wait a second. That sounds like independent Baptist. I grew up that way. I mean,
well,
that's the way it
yeah, I mean,
was.
what do we have? We you strip all of the fun things out of Christianity, and all you're left with is this kind of like, we're a bunch of monks, praying and fasting, and that's all it is.
Right.
Well, you're going to lose that generation, that youth, and they're going to be gone. And we've
Yeah.
seen this over and over. And so I'm not saying that you have to entertain the youth. You don't have to set up the circus in the church to keep them busy. But think about what Christianity is. We have the truth,
Right.
that the Genesis 1:1 is how creation began. That's how everything started. That the Bible is an accurate record of how things began. So we have the truth. We have the handle on the past, the present, and the future. We have prophecy. We have looking forward. God's telling us, hey, ahead of time, here's what's going to happen in great detail, right? And throughout the entirety of the Bible, there's prophecies foretelling what's going to happen. We have the mysteries. All the things that were hidden in the Old Testament times now are being revealed through the church, that the church itself is a mystery. We have the power of the Holy Spirit. Think about how many churches won't even utter the name Holy Spirit because
Yeah.
they're afraid of people raising their hands, or
Yeah. Or
becoming
they'll be branded.
emotional.
Yeah.
We've so deadened worship in at least Western Protestantism, that it's stripped all of the life out of it. And I wrote an article years ago, probably 10 years ago, 11 years ago, called "Behold the Dead Horse." And I was talking about these prophecy conferences I was going to, and there wasn't any young people there. I mean, there were none.
Mm.
I was the youngest person
Mm.
there, and I think at the time I was in my early 40s.
Wow.
And most of the audience were silver-haired, seasoned citizens, which is great. I'm glad that people are coming to these. I'm not knocking them. I'm just saying there wasn't any young people. There wasn't any representation from youth groups or anything. And that failure to capture the imagination of our children by telling them about true things, prophecy, creation, giants, all the things that most churches won't touch with a 10-foot pole. Now the kids have to turn to outside things to get, um, things to become fascinated with, Harry Potter, all of the Marvel movies, superheroes, and all that other
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
And we've stripped out all the supernatural power of Scripture, and all that we've left them is this moral code of do's and don'ts. And by this generation, I'd say at least from the '60s onward, the sexual revolution. I mean, we've completely lost that battle in terms of the battle over the minds of the youth, because of what the world is offering them is far more fascinating and entertaining than what Sunday church is going to give them on
Yeah.
a Sunday morning.
Well, churches really in Christianity, at least in the Western culture, has really built itself into a rules-based exoskeleton, in a
Mm-hmm.
lot of denominations. And then everybody that are in those denominations where they have where they have a lot of rules and regulations, things like that, they're scared to death of the charismatics and Pentecostals because they're on the opposite end, of the spectrum, and so, at least in the Western culture, and me being a pastor for so many years, I got tired of Western culture church, man. I got to be honest, because church, to me, what I saw especially out of pastors in 15 years as a student pastor, I saw a bunch of guys because I was in mega churches, right? To me, I saw a bunch of guys that were corporate climbing, trying to get to the next bigger church. And this is literally the way it goes, at your staff meeting. Hey, guys, we need to bring in more people, right? We need to bring in more people so we can build the kingdom, so that we can build more buildings, so that we can get more money, so that we can offer more programs, so that we can get more people. And so that we can, and it's this vicious circle
instead of how do we help.
Yeah, and they but what they do is they couch it all in
saving people.
Yeah, we're helping, we're doing this. And let's be honest, the truth is there's really not much going on in the Western culture church. I do not believe what you see in the Western culture church for the most part is what Jesus intended the church to be. I just don't believe it. And that was actually the reason why I got out of Southern Baptist life. Sorry, guys, but I did. I was disgusted with everything that I saw. I had a pastor that grew a church from 2,500 down to 900. Our youth ministry went from like 20 kids when I got there to over 600. And we were having kids getting saved, families getting saved, mom and dad's getting saved. But guess what? They wouldn't stay at the church because the pastor was preaching stuff off the internet. And one of the men got up in a business meeting and said, "You want to know what the pastor is going to be preaching next week? Here it is right here." And, actually he didn't have it on his phone. He had it all printed out. He printed it all out. And then he printed out the series that he had printed the last series. And here's the last series he just preached. Yeah. Not only was he preaching the messages, but he was even using the illustrations that some of them were 20 years old. You remember the old, what was it? The aftershave. Thanks. I needed that. Right. Yeah. Yeah. But we're talking about how just a few years ago, it was so outdated, and he used those type of things in the service. And people were like,
he probably figured that if he went back far enough in time, no one would remember. You know what I'm saying? It's probably what his thought process was.
But and it was that bad. Yeah. And so, the Western culture church is not what I believe the church is supposed to be.
Also, if I just want to touch on I know that you were talking about as far as bringing in the youth. And now this is what I find as well, is that, for me, when I was younger, before I was saved, I grew up Catholic, but now I kind of feel away from the Catholic Church a little bit,
a lot of it.
But yeah, more Baptist Christian based. But the what I find was that it was a lot of stuff wasn't talked about in ways that I can, for one, understand, right, properly understand as a child, right, and because of that scared me. Right, like just even talking about the rapture or just any of it, heaven, hell, all that was very intimidating to me as a child, and so and as a child, I mean, let's say early teens, and the thought of like, what, I'm only like 13 years old, I'm not gonna, I guess, I'm gonna be raptured, but that scares me, right? I mean, I want to live my life. I'm only 13 or 14 or 15 years old, and I think a lot of that has to come down to the way that the pastors then basically transcribe this information for the youth, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like that probably needs to be, done in certain ways where it's not so kind of brimstone and fire at first. So then they feel a little bit more comfortable, with it. And again, that's just me and my personal. Now, as I've gotten older, right, I'm on a different plane now. But when I was younger, those things, even though I loved God. Those things scared me as a young adult, and I think some of that is being, and again, I mean, I could be completely on the wrong path here, but just as for me and on my walk with my religion, with God, and that's where I was always at,
Yeah, I think that there's we did a huge disservice over the years too of children's ministries regarding their understanding of Noah and the flood and the ark, and we make it this cutesy little kind of the giraffe's neck sticking out of the ark.
Yeah, right.
It's all kind of, everybody's happy and there's a rainbow, and we don't don't tell them why God brought the flood. We don't tell them about the giants and the intent by Satan to corrupt the genetic code of man. Not that we need to explain to that level to them, but
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
just give them the sunshine and roses, and so all they come to think of it is a fairy tale.
Yeah.
And they're at church 1 or 2 hours a week, and then they're at school the rest of the week, and they're learning that the earth is billions of years old, and that
Yeah.
men evolved from this. And by the time they're in middle school, like, it's, church is not something you take serious, and
Yeah.
church becomes more of an association versus an identity. And I'm not saying that you have to identify as um um Baptist or Catholic in terms of who you are.
Yeah.
We should inculcate into our children that they are identifying with Christ as believers in Christ, as Christians, and that we go to a church like this, but this church is not define us necessarily, right?
Yeah.
And so there is I wrote an article 2 years ago called "The Church of Christ in the Last Days." So I've mentioned this many times on my own channel and yours, that I married into a Church of Christ. I grew up Southern Baptist, and thankfully, for a very brief period of time in my junior and senior year, I think we had a youth director, and we'd gone through about a dozen different youth directors. So he came in kind of right at the end, but he was just got out of the Marine Corps, just newly saved, was very on fire for the Lord, and very on fire about prophecy. But I did, at the time, I didn't appreciate it or understand it or anything like that. But we got a little taste of it then, as teenagers. And all of the people in my youth group, my inner group, we still are passionate about it because we got exposed to it early on.
Yeah.
But marrying into the Church of Christ, they are very much, pretty Calvinistic. They came out of Episcopalian kind of background, between Episcopalian and Baptist, I think.
Yeah.
And then during the Restoration movement, and they're amillennial. They didn't used to be amillennial. They were a mix of post-millennial and premillennial. And then about the 1930s, 1940s, a guy came through and basically did this witch hunt throughout all the churches of Christ and drove out all the premillennialists. And then all they're left with is amillennialists. So there's no kingdom coming on the earth. Christ is not returning
Right.
to reclaim the earth and set up his kingdom. We are the kingdom right now. So this is how they pretty much have operated for the last 70 years. So I want to read this quote that I've used numerous times because it is so impactful of the deadening effect when churches don't talk about prophecy. Here's a deadening effect that happens to those churches. And this is not from a guy that's premillennial. He's not pro prophecy. He's actually a Church of Christ professor at Pepperdine, or I think he's at the University of Houston, but he was writing for Pepperdine magazine, which is comes out of the Pepperdine University for Churches of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote an article back in 2000 called "Eschatology: Essential Yet Essentially Ignored," and he's talking about the effects of it that it's had on the Church of Christ denomination for 70 years now, right?
Mm-hmm.
He said eschatology died as a living concern among our churches because of at least four related developments: the acceptance of the church kingdom identity fostered by Tolbert Fanning and the like-minded sectarians. So the idea that we are the kingdom right now. The powerful and brutal assault on millennial modes of thoughts and millennial thinkers, particularly premillennial, by names this guy that did it. Number three is the subsequent and ruthlessly enforced triumph of amillennialism and the dogma of church kingdom identity, and then filling the vacuum in eschatological thinking with inane, hybridized, life after death language, uniformed or uninformed by biblical or systematic theology. All we have left is like millennialism. We are neither passionately radical nor invigoratingly hopeful. And I love that because it when you strip the
Yeah.
supernatural power out of scripture, you're left with just rules and regulations. You go back to this white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, Puritan, pilgrim kind of mindset of we must be pious, we can't smile, we can't have fun. It's just and you lose the next generation. You will lose that next generation, without fail.
So Pete,
And that's what.
my
Go ahead.
apologies. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say that when Christians, when Barna and all these groups go out and do these polls, and they poll the number of children that when they turn 18 and leave their household to go to college or go wherever, work, military, how many of them leave the church, don't come back to the church, and it's like 80%. I mean, it's a huge number, and they may come back later down the road when they're in their when they become parents, maybe in their 30s or
Right.
whatever. but there's a good, even in my life, good 15 years is gone, where I'm not active in the church, not doing anything for Christ, not doing anything, um, because I'm revolting against this piousness and piety and morality based everything, and I see church as just a thing you do, not who you are. I don't identify it with the Israelis today, because of the October 7th attack. Orthodox, liberal, ultra Orthodox, I mean secular, all of them are together, unified in this mindset because they are Jewish. It's whether they're culturally or religious, that's how they identify themselves. They identify
Right.
with this down to their DNA. Christians have never embraced this of identifying with Christ to that level since the first century, and we've lost it. We've become so sectarian minded. Well, I can't do this because I don't believe that the color of carpet should be red. It should always be blue, or whatever.
Yeah.
We can't have one cup. We have to use many different cups. And there's so many different things we can divide over and have divided over. And Halloween, the holidays is just one more thing here in the most recent cycle of how this thing flows through in different cultures and the rising and falling of nations and empires. This is just one more, that in my mind, the last iteration of it. So
Yeah. So one of the things in bringing this back around, um, so as Christians, let's hit this from a Christian standpoint. Then I want to hit it from the world standpoint. As Christians, we were talking about, what if somebody takes their kid out, dresses them up like, they dress them up like some character that's not a witch or a ghost or something like, it's a mom and dad. They go to church. They love the Lord, and they don't see a problem with their kid going out with their friends, and they're walking behind them with flashlights, and the kids are all going up getting candy from people. And or they're at home and they're passing out candy, they don't have the light off and telling all the kids to get off my lawn type of thing, because they're too righteous and holy to do it. What do we say to the Christians that are judging those people? Like, I'll be honest with you, tonight my wife and I are going to our church that's offering a trunk or treat for kids to come to, and they will get a gospel track along with tons of candy. And I saw an article this morning by a well-known pastor who is on a very popular app about the end times, and he was saying this pastor is telling people that basically if your church participates in trunk or treat or something like that, dude, you might as well just call your Christianity into question. And I was like, okay, so here's my problem. We were talking about earlier, if I do something that I know is going to offend another Christian, then maybe I shouldn't do it. The problem we're in now is everybody's offended.
Yeah, everyone's offended.
Let me say this as nicely as possible. Everybody's offended. Okay. And I know that's really loud. Let me say one thing just real quickly. Last week, for goodness sakes, we were busy working that morning, and I was slam busy when you and I were about to do a Zoom call, and we were about to do a podcast. And I didn't realize what time it was. And John was like, Pete's on the line. I'm like, oh my gosh. I go running downstairs. I had a tank top on because I was working on the computer doing editing and stuff. And I didn't take time to put a t-shirt on. I had people, and I'm not kidding. I got a phone call about it. Okay. I had people, Christians, very offended that I had a tank top on and I was showing muscle.
I find it very hypocritical. I mean, a lot of people a lot of Christians nowadays in the church, especially, they're talking about woke culture, right? About complaining all the time, being very sensitive, all this other stuff. At the same time, every little thing offends them. And I find that very often.
Yeah. What do we do, Pete?
got it.
Because this is a problem, man. Because Christians have gotten, some of them, man, dude, they're ready to take up arms. I'm like, what, do y'all plan to come to my house? You're that upset? You're gonna burn my tank tops or something? It was the last second. I just ran down and we ended up doing the podcast.
You know what that's from? That's from insecurity in their own faith. That's what I feel.
I think that's a great point. I mean, let's talk about, what do we do in that situation? Because you're going to have people that are offended by one thing or another. Paul said, if you got a brother, that sees you're eating meat and he's offended, weaker in the faith, then don't eat it. Right? Well, dude, everybody's offended about everything now.
Yeah, and I think in those situations, I as I mentioned yesterday, that for instance, if I have a neighbor that I hang out with and we discuss things, and he had a problem with alcoholism, let's just say he's a recovering alcoholic, I shouldn't drink around him. I should not open a beer or have a glass of wine, because that's something that he struggles with, and I think that's the sentiment that Paul's getting to with regards to this, and causing the other brother to stumble. Or gambling, whatever the thing is, right? You don't want to be that stumbling block to that other person. But I've had people complain on numerous occasions about the art that I create to put on my website, because some of it is scary. Some of it's pretty graphic, and not graphic obscenely, but like, it's designed to be like, if I'm going to show the gates of hell or something, it's supposed to be, because one, I'm tired of, I have, aside from the copyright issues and all the issues that have come about with copyright laws and using images you find online, there's that aspect that I want to get sued or have my website, taken over because of some image that was posted, 30 years ago. And then, two, it's like Mormons have all of they have all of what do they call it? They have all like the best, eschatological art that was out there. And I was like, why do I have to go to use a Mormon image that created for the Latter-day Saint Church or whatever, when I can just make my own? We have the technology now for me to do that. And so I've had people complain about it. And one person just the other day was emailing saying, hey, I followed you for years, and now your artwork's so dark and it's like, you just, scary. And I don't get it. And I'm like, well, that artwork, first of all, it's like in his gallery. So I just put all the art in there together.
Yeah.
But it was going through a series. When I was going through Revelation, I had the false prophet, I had the locust demon, whatever, coming out of so that was all associated with particular articles that I was doing. I wasn't just creating it to create it. And so then after I explained it, they're like, oh, okay, I get it. And I said, it's supposed to be scary because you know what? It's going to be scary. And I want it to scare people. And if I have to take my art to the next level to reach the next generation, because they're so desensitized to nothing, things that used to scare people, remember Psycho, that shocked America back in the 1960s.
Oh yeah,
shocked America. That is like on Turner Classic Movies now.
I know.
Your kids can watch it, like, it's like, it's nothing. I mean, they are exposed to far worse. So I think my art is more of a reflection of both the time, but also the seriousness of the subject. But to your point, exactly, one of my subscribers put it very succinctly, and I love how she did this. She says, because a previous subscriber was saying, well, I don't celebrate Halloween, blah, blah, blah. And he wasn't, condemning anybody that did. He was saying, I don't, right?
Right.
And she's like, yeah, it just seems like there's four options. You can celebrate it, you can ignore it, you can rail against it, or you can use it as an opportunity to evangelize.
Right.
And so I think that the best option for us is to use any opportunity, not just Christian or not just Halloween, but Christmas, Thanksgiving, the 4th of July, Super Bowl, whatever holiday is coming about. Use that as, use it as an opportunity to evangelize, however you can do that.
Right.
St. Patrick's Day, when I talk about the kids all think it's about leprechauns, four-leaf clovers and all that, but I say, no, it's really named after this St. Patrick that brought Christianity to the country of Ireland, or the island, I guess, at the time of Ireland, back in whatever century it was, 9th century. And so you go through the history of it. I talked to him about Halloween. What is Halloween? Where did it come from? What does it mean to the Christian? What does it mean to us? And what does it become here in American culture? I mean, you got to talk to your kids. You've got to explain things to them in a way that they can understand. And I use whatever tools that I have. I've used this example many times, but I use Minecraft. I said, we live in this world today, and this is real life, and it's kind of like survival mode on Minecraft. I mean, you can die. You
Yeah.
get killed in
Yeah.
Minecraft. You have to
Yeah.
eat. You have to like scrounge materials to build the things you want. I said, but when we go in the rapture and we get glorified bodies and we're in heaven, I said, we're like in creative mode. We can fly. You can go underwater. I mean, it doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want. You can't die. You're just able to do whatever your mind can imagine, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so that's for them that right, speaking at their level to an 8-year-old, right?
Yeah.
But then bringing it back into scripture and showing them and teaching them. And I think that's parents have so long relied on the church to provide all of the morality, all of the do's and don'ts, all of this, and it's been laziness on the parents' part. It's been laziness on
Yeah.
the pulpit's part to um, to to show the power and the supernatural. I mean, the Bible is cool. I mean, the Bible is amazing, and once you get that, it lights a fire under you that can't be undone. And
Yeah.
my fire got lit back in 2007, and it's still going. And
Yeah.
and I had already grown up in the church, and I was bored. The church is
Yeah.
boring. I think people are bored with the idea of heaven, and that's why they think of pagan ideas of the afterlife, like Valhalla and all that other stuff, as this
Yeah.
giant party, and they think of heaven as this one long church service. That's all they think about. In reality, we will never exhaust the end of God for
Yeah.
eternity. We can't even
Yeah.
wrap our minds around that, because God will always continue to surprise us and to wow us a trillion years from now, and then a trillion years from then. Like, we were
That's
still going to
insane,
be
isn't it?
amazed and blown.
It's crazy.
We just can't comprehend it. And
Yeah.
that's the
That's what I was about to
excitement
say,
that you need to
incomprehensible.
Yeah.
instill into our youth, into our younger people, that whatever the Bible and what heaven and what God has in store is far better than anything the world has to offer, whether it's
Yeah.
religions, philosophies, gadgets, technology, whatever, fads, fashions. And that's the passion I think we need to instill in the next generation. Now, I think
Yeah.
we're at a time at this point, but we keep trying, and I keep instilling that in my children. I keep
Right.
trying to, because they see my own excitement in this, and how passionate I am about it. And it's not something that I just do on Sundays. It's something I do every day. In fact, they've had to rail me back, and my wife's had to reel me in and say, "Hey, okay, when the kids are at school, you can do whatever you want. But when they come home, you need to focus on them." I was like, "Okay, that's a balanced deal. I can work with that." So,
Yeah. My wife does the same thing to
Oh
me.
yeah.
So, okay. So we've talked about paganism, and we just finished kind of talking about how the church responds and Christians respond. How do you think this pagan world sees us as Christians now?
no, we're probably not even a thought in their mind at this point, other than when it comes to cultural flashpoint issues like abortion and
So we're a speed bump.
the alphabet mafia agenda and all that. So I think Charlie Kirk had said something, and it stuck with me, and I don't think he meant to make a quote out of it or something, but he said it, and it just resonated with me in a way. And he said, I think he was talking to Jack Hibbs, and they're one of the, like, they sit on the stage and they're talking on the couches or whatever.
Right.
Mm.
And he said, the problem with paganism is that you have many gods, and with many gods you have many moralities, and with many moralities you have a lot of confusion, because now everybody has this moral right to do whatever it is that their belief system wants them to do, whether that's to cut the head off chickens, or have sex on an altar, or sacrifice baby, or whatever. I mean, you let your imagination run wild, but whatever we can think of is been thought of and done by
Yeah.
somebody. And now we're in this postmodern society where everybody's views are considered equally valid, even though they're not equally valid. Just like not all cultures are equally valid. Some cultures are superior to other cultures. That's why they go on and on for centuries and centuries, and others fade out very quickly, because they're very destructive in how they, function.
Right.
Same with ideologies, and we've just come to embrace all of this, and this is that resurgence of paganism that's come back in America in a big way. And for a lot of Christians, I think the last 10 years have been kind of a wake-up call. Maybe, and I'll even go back as far to say 20 years. So 9/11, right? Time frame.
Yeah.
It was a wake-up call that America is not invulnerable. America is not untouchable, in that the way the world was is not always going to be the way the world's going to be, right? That there's that worldview has been shook and changed. Fast forward a few years and we get things like the mortgage crisis. Hey, my financial health and wealth is not as secure as I thought it was. And people begin to think about the economy in terms of, well, how am I going to survive retirement when I've just lost everything in my 401k, because
Yeah.
of the mortgage meltdown, right? Fast forward a few years, you get the increasingly tyrannical government beginning to mandate things that are unconstitutional on the public. And so slowly, I think Americans have begun to wake up from this dream that we've been in for the last, since World War II, or, right after World War II. And we have the reality that, hey, what we have now is not going to last forever unless we fight for it. And,
Right.
that quote from Reagan saying that, you're always one generation away from tyranny or for some kind of, losing your independence and your freedom. And then, we had COVID, right? COVID changed, again, everything,
Everything.
because now even little towns like this that have always kind of been in a bubble, the town that I live in, and they don't really think about the outside world, and people are just kind of, focused inward on their belly buttons. It now is being touched by the outside world, saying you have to do this, and people again are waking up, and now they're starting to look at things with Israel. Again, Israel, this is their 9/11 moment. There was the way that Israel was before October 7th, and then there was the way that Israel is going to be after October 7th. And these kind of defining moments in time that are shaking people out of their normalcy bias, what you and I talked about last week,
Right.
and causing them to wake up. And this is, I think, God allows these things. And so, paganism has captured the imaginations of the youth through books, movies, music, television, comic books, art. I mean, you think about it, it's captured these kids' minds,
Yeah.
and that all pales in comparison to what the Bible has. I mean, think about Superman, one of the biggest superhero icons of the last century and a half. He is not even as powerful as an angel.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
an angel would crush that dude in a
Yeah. I
heartbeat,
know.
right? And so that's probably just a regular old angel,
Yeah.
Um, but to think about the things that are transpiring, and I will say that I am a little bit thankful for Marvel in this regard, that they've kind of popularized this idea of the multiverse. And I know people rail against the multiverse, but you think about Marvel and it's trying to present this other reality where there's gods and goddesses, and there's aliens, and there's mutants, and there's this and this and this, and then there's also multiple realities, right? Well, at least it's gotten people to think that there's other dimensions. And so we've
Yeah.
seen even this here recently with the change in language with the UFO disclosure and all that stuff going on
Right.
Capitol Hill, that the people that are in the know aren't calling these things extraterrestrials exclusively anymore. Now they're starting to call them
Multi-dimensional.
ultra terrestrials,
Yeah.
because they know that they're dimensional beings, that they can cross
Right.
dimensions into different dimensions. So, and I think that's, Chuck Missler was talking about that 20 years, 30 years ago. Like
Yeah.
the Bible has always been way ahead of
Yes.
where pop culture and stuff is. We just it's like we refuse to allow ourselves to fully explore and capitalize on what scripture's already given us, the power and
Yeah.
the stories and all this cool stuff that happens in there.
Right.
And I don't know why churches do that. And they're killing their next generation. Their generation today is aging out, and they're not being replaced by the next generation. They're going somewhere else. And it's just this trend that's been happening across not just Church of Christ, but Baptist, Methodist, Episcopalians. And you do see some churches that are flourishing, because churches like Jack Hibbs and people that are not afraid to talk about
Yeah.
life and all the
Yeah.
craziness in there and the cool stuff in the Bible. Tom Hughes, others, that have churches that are still thriving, because they're talking and they are engaging in the culture. They are talking about prophecy. They're showing people how Bible prophecy is being fulfilled in our own day. And that's exciting because it means
Yeah.
that we're about to be out of here. And so, anyways, I'm rambling on and on, but
No,
that's
it's
what
good.
the church is missing.
Let me wrap it up here because I know Kevin has an appointment here, and so do I. But let me wrap it up this way, Pete, and see. We'll get your comment on this, and Kevin also. Jesus said you're to be salt and light. In those days, the Jewish people, they did a lot of things on the roof of the house. And on the porticos, things like that. And they didn't have shingles back then and stuff like that. And so they used this stuff called gypsum, and they would put salt in the gypsum, which would make it pliable, and they put it on the roof. And so when they would put that gypsum on there, it made it to where the people, because it would harden it, made it to where people could walk on the surface of this thing without water, coming in, cracking, things like that. And so, but the problem is, once you use the salt in the gypsum, the salt was no longer any good. It was mixed in. And that gypsum is a type of the world. And the church has gotten so mixed into the world, into paganism and all of the different things, that it's ineffective anymore. And this, you have to go, you can't just say the church in general, I guess, but you have to go case by case basis. As a youth pastor, I used to tell people, look, I got your kids 2 hours a week. You got them 7 days a week. Who does the most damage here? Who's doing the most good? It's not me. I'm doing the best I can in those 2 hours, but you're the one who's responsible for your kids. But I honestly think, we talk about the Marvel thing and all of this other stuff. I think that we've become so embroiled in it. And it's been like the frog in the pot. It's just been over such an amount of time that we don't realize that not are we cooking, but we've just cooled off to the point where we're ineffective as Christians. And no wonder we can't tell our kids, anything anymore, because you know what? Our kids don't see it in our own lives. They don't see an excitement for God. They don't see an excitement or a passion for prophecy or Jesus coming back or anything. All they see is, you're so busy doing this, and this. You're aggravated, and then you have this set of rules and this exoskeleton of religiosity over you that I don't really want any part of that. And so a lot of what I see, and because we talk about your artwork and things like, dude, I get crushed for my stuff on, the clown pop in the bubble. Oh my goodness. I was like, dude, it was apropos for the moment. The evil is about to pop the bubble. Do you get it? And so, but whatever, it's all good. So, when it comes to how the people or the world sees us, I think the world, for the most part, sees Christianity as a speed bump at this point, because you ain't no different than me. And your little views and trying to block me from doing an abortion or this and that, I'll just run you over. And that's what a speed bump is. It's just to slow you down. You don't even slow us down anymore. So we've quit. In other words, tie it back. We've quit being salt and light. We're just good for nothing but to be walked on the roof, and the world walks all over us.
Yeah. And even the Church of Philadelphia, Christ said that they would have, even though they remain faithful, they would have little strength. And you think about how Christianity, the impact it had on the culture back in the 50s, and the weight of a preacher's or pastor's testimony in a community versus today, it's night and day. I mean, there's not even a comparison anymore.
Yeah.
And so that, to me, that there's that. I mean, we went from an Acts 2 kind of culture where everybody kind of believed the same thing to like an Acts 19 culture where it's just all very much pagan, and there's that shift in the culture that Satan's been waging against us. And as I mentioned in the article, the Satan is kind of focused on two things. He was always trying to destroy the church. And when he realized that every time he tried to crush the church, it just spread faster and further. And then so he turned to corrupting it, and he's been very successful in doing that for the last 1700 years. And then the other thing is he is hyper focused on destroying Israel. He was trying to destroy the Jewish people before they became a nation through things like the diaspora, the pogroms, the persecutions, the expulsions, the ultimately the final solution, the Holocaust. Um, and then now, since they become a nation, he's turned one Hitler into millions of Hitlers with militant Islam coming against them in every waking moment. So we're seeing that change shift again, because now God is going to allow some things to be fulfilled prophetically, and now we're starting to enter into the final seconds of the last minute of the game, right? And so that's we should be excited at this time, and the fact that most churches, and like you, I'm not going to throw every church under the bus, but the majority of pulpits in America are not talking about what's going on in the world from a prophetic standpoint. So I think it's disheartening, and it's obviously like the deadening effect that it has in churches. It's also deadened our power and our reach in communities and culture at large. And I saw the other day on YouTube, it was Glenn Beck was interviewing Max Lucado. Max Lucado came out of the Church of Christ.
Right.
He's well-known Church of Christ for all his life, really, until just recently. And I think he still goes to a Church of Christ, but they're not like the old school ones I go to now, but they're they use instruments and things like that for their service, worship and stuff. So, it's just like these guys are talking about it. Joe Rogan's talking about the mark of the beast with his guest. You've got
but the Christians aren't.
Famous writers, huh?
Yeah, right. But the Christians aren't.
Writers are talking about the return of the old gods. I can't remember her name. Virginia Woolf, I think is her name. Or Naomi Wolf, sorry.
Yeah.
Virginia Woolf's a play, right?
Yeah.
And you've got people in the world at large, mass media, influencers, movie stars, all these folks talking in prophetic language, but the church is still way back over here, cowering, not wanting to offend anybody over here on this. But and that's the dichotomy, right? You have on one hand, you have the militant folks that said you can't celebrate anything, you might as well be Jehovah's Witness because you can't even celebrate anything without some tie back to some pagan thing, back to whatever. On the other hand, you've got people that are just refuse to accept the supernatural power in Scripture. They don't want to talk about it. They've got their head in the sand and they're whistling past the graveyard. They don't want it. They just want to ride the fence and make waves, and then it strips the power out of our faith and it kills it on the other hand. So that's the kind of the dichotomy I was kind of getting to in the article. And we can't live like that. We need to, whatever culture you're in, you have to learn to adapt to whatever that culture is, to whatever degree, but be so different enough to where you stand out and people ask, why are you different? And not different because you're peculiar, weird, but because you're happy and because you love and because you are kind and forgiving and merciful, and you show that way. You're not being peculiar as weird and because you look different or don't have any fun, or you're just like one of those odd people. That's not what we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be different because we love and be known by our love for other people and our kindness and our charity and our mercy. And we saw that in the United States early on. We created all the universities, all the hospitals, all the major charitable things going on. And for almost 200 years, it was like that until things begin to change and unravel.
Yeah.
So let's wrap it up. Culture.
Oh yeah. So let's wrap it up. Here's the deal. Christian, you live in a pagan culture in America. The bubble has been popped. You have really one of two choices: either fall in line with the culture, or you live against the culture. But in your living against the culture, don't kill other Christians because you don't agree with them, and don't turn everybody off just because you feel like everybody's not following your rules, and for goodness sakes, God says we're to love God with all our heart, soul, and mind, and our neighbor as ourselves. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yep.
So, hey, Pete, thank you for coming in today, man. I'm going to put the link below for the article. I think everybody needs to read it. I feel like I didn't do a real good job today of really going through that article with you. But dude, you got to read the article. I think it was really good. And if you haven't read Pete's stuff in the past, just go back through his archives and read. Great information, great insight. One of the really guys that are on top of Bible prophecy today with very unique insight. So thank you for coming in, Kev.
Thanks,
awesome to have you, man.
Yeah, I love sitting in
And so we will see you again, I'm sure, at least I hope. So guys, don't forget, this is Impact, where we talk to people that are impacting their world. Thanks for coming in.
And I forgot how it makes you.
Dude, yesterday when you were talking, I was like, I was like, somebody got good pre-workout.
Especially if you haven't done it in a long time, like it just hits you hard, you know.
Yeah.
I guess when you
I
do
started
a lot
taking
of
that other
you
than energy drinks. Like instead of taking energy drinks, I just drink pre-workout.
Pre-workout works much better. Hey, Pete, I want to introduce you to Kevin Broderick. Kevin is Kevin's one of those guys that that's kind of the ride or die guy, you know, one of those guys that you trust your family with in one of those extreme things, you know, if ever something went down. Kevin and I are business partners on this Trades Pro training, and God's just really man, it's been a crazy ride. So we are moving forward, and but we started I started the Impact podcast on my channel, and then we started Impact onto another separate channel, and we're trying to get that moving. I'm starting to see some of the handwriting on the wall, maybe like my channel's being obviously throttled again. Normally I'm at 200 to 300 400 viewers an hour right now. Let's see, right now it was interesting because I looked at it, I was like, what is going on? Right now it's at 35 an hour.
Oh wow,
that's insane.
The attack on everything Christian base that continues.
So
are you on Rumble at all?
I'm on Rumble as well. So everything I have translates over to Rumble. But Rumble, honestly, Rumble kind of sucks.
Yeah. No, it does. It does.
Yeah.
I was going to do a live last Friday, and I set everything up, and I hit go live, and then nothing happened. And I was like, and then finally, when you read the fine print, you're like, oh, you have to use a third-party streaming platform to copy the link. I was like, oh man.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So
Rumble's trying to take off, but and they're trying to be kind of more of the open free speech platform, but I think it's going to take a little time. These monopolies, they have such a huge
they have
hold on the market. Yeah. Well, also, and then you got to remember too, is that they have all the technology, all the people behind where they can also throttle Rumble at that point. What I'm saying? Like, because Google and YouTube, same company.
They control the market.
So. Yeah, they kind of control market when it becomes that big, man.
So anyway, we're going to put this on multiple platforms. We're starting to put everything on multiple platforms just for that reason. I might move everything over. Just that I have another one called One Dead Man Talking that I put up, and started putting more just the Christian-based stuff over there as well, just to have multiple platforms, multiple streams. And it's interesting, like I put up a video that on my channel got like 400 views, put it on One Dead Man Talking, and just within a couple hours it got 3,200 views. So so who knows, man? It's just I think you never know, but
you got to play that game with them.
Yeah, exactly right.
But it's a pleasure meeting you, Pete. Jeff's talked a lot about you, and I know you guys have done multiple podcasts in the recent past here. So no, it's great to meet you, and looking forward to talking to you for sure.
Yeah. So
good. Yeah, I got a lot of both really positive feedback from yesterday from the article, and then a lot of
that was good. We couldn't watch the Monday night live until Monday night, or Monday live until Monday night, just
Yeah.
because, during the day we're so stinking busy. I can't get in there. But I got up, read that article, and then I was like, I got to call Pete, so love to go into that. So that was really good on paganism. Let me, I'm going to get us started because, I know we're running late and you've got things to do, and so do I. But so let me get us started. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to try to get us out of here in about 45 minutes ish, in that range. Yeah. So just let me know, because I know Kev has something he's got to do, but we'll go and we'll get it done. So let me get us going. And again, Pete, as always, thank you. Pete was like, man, people are going to get tired of me. I'm like, I don't care. They get tired of me, so who cares, Hey, the issue is we're being faithful. We're getting the message out.
Yeah.
And the way I look at it is the ones God wants to see it, they're going to see it.
Oh, 100%.
So
That's all that matters.
We'll just go from there. So let me get us going. 3, 2, 1, John, we're good to go? Okay, good.
The impact.